Open and be seated.
All right. Good morning, counsel. Good morning, Ms. Reed. And all right, Mr. Alessi, I will hear you on your argument on the voir dire.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm just loading up my computer. Your Honor, I am going to address the Trooper Paul aspect, and then I'm going to address the Dr. Scorti-Bello aspect of Dr. Welcher. With regard to Trooper Paul, I would like to draw the court's attention to the following documents for the straightforward proposition that Dr. Welcher has not only reviewed, he has not only considered, that he has adopted. I went back and looked at the documents, and the basis for this is as follows. Slides 22 and 23 do not just depict Trooper Joseph Paul himself. They show Trooper Paul conducting the CARS analysis on February 1st of 2022. Importantly, these slides highlight the mileage odometer of 12,665, and I respectfully request the court to anchor into that odometer reading, because I'm going to show the path that odometer reading takes through all of the documents, but I want to emphasize the start, the genesis of the odometer reading of 12,665 miles is with Trooper Paul as he conducted the CARS analysis on February 1st. Now, here's where Dr. Welcher comes in. Dr. Welcher then uses this key data point, odometer 12,665, as the basis, the starting point for his determination of the locations and times for the events of January 29 of 2022. Dr. Welcher uses his scenario analysis of Ms. Reed's travels, and that's detailed on slides 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28, to calculate and then deduct 36 miles from the odometer according to Trooper Paul on February 1st of 2022 to arrive at an odometer reading of 12,629, which obviously is different from the start, the anchor I talked about of 12,665. So the assumed odometer of 12,629, again, is based on Trooper Paul's CARS analysis in slides 22 and 23, are then used as a tether, a connection to the events recorded by the VCH and the Lexus on the following slides: 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 35, and 36. I elucidate this and I explicate the slide numbers to show how many there are in Dr. Welcher's report that are rooted in the anchor point and then the change in the deduction of the odometer. So the events memorialized by Trooper Paul on February 1st, including the odometer reading, provide the foundation for Dr. Welcher's entire analysis of the VCH events. The entire analysis of Dr. Welcher's VCH events. That is the adoption aspect of what I started with. Two more points. In addition, Dr. Welcher testified on his voir dire that the image on the left of slide 36 from his January 30th, 2025 presentation came from a file marked carsj.pol. Now, he did contend that it wasn't the exact same image, but I want to go to this. In fact, the image on slide 36 is from the drone used by Trooper Paul, and the citation for that is page 4, item 11 of the CARS report. That's where the drones are from. Dr. Welcher didn't do any drone activity. He took the drone that he had in his report that was just a little bit different than the one I was showing him. It comes from page 4, item 11 of the CARS report. And I quote, "The crash scene was documented during the on-scene investigation by utilizing Alicia's GNSS GPS mapping system and a DJI Mavic 2 UAS. This data was input to a computer-aided diagram program, which is IMS 360, here's the key, to produce a scale diagram of this collision. So the DJI Mavic is the CARS team drone. This image of Dr. Welcher's slide 36 is clearly and indisputably from the drone. And the only drone extant is the drone of Trooper Paul and the CARS team. Last point with regard to the Trooper Paul basis in adoption of Dr. Welcher. Mr. Brennan asked Dr. Welcher on voir dire if the image from slide 36 actually came from the CERT team, which is simply not true. The CERT team, actually Lieutenant Tully with the CERT team, took about a dozen photos of the taillight in the snow in the dark around 6 p.m. on January 29, 2022. Lieutenant O'Hara said that the CERT team never traveled back to the scene again. So there were very obviously no photos or images taken by the CERT team in the daylight from the drone. And I again refer to slides 22 and slides 23, where Dr. Welcher said it was more likely than not that it was Trooper Paul in those slides, but the point, whether it's Trooper Paul or not, is completely overwhelmed by what I just argued and presented as specific factual basis for a review, a consideration, and an adoption of the work of Trooper Paul. Unless Your Honor has any questions, I would now move on to Dr. Scorti-Bello. Thank you. Dr. Scorti-Bello will be much shorter. Mr. Woke, do we have the slide of the Dr. Scorti-Bello that was it's at the end of the slide presentation with her name on it?
The TV's off.
Oh. If you just give the slide number, please.
131.
So it is slide 131. I almost know it verbatim, Your Honor, so I will continue. If Ms. Gilman has slide or someone could turn it on. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. So with regard to slide 31, at the very top, and this again is a slide presentation of Dr. Welcher. So up at the very top, and so Dr. Welcher admitted that he not only reviewed the autopsy report, he admitted that he not only considered the autopsy report, he admitted that he adopted it, and I'm going to put adopt in quotes, to the extent that he used it in his slide presentation, and he actually, to show the depth of those three verbs, he's got in orange highlight under final diagnosis, multiple skull fractures, base of skull, and cavallarium. He testified, obviously, about the rear wounds of Mr. O'Keefe. He testified about how he believed those wounds came about, and he cited as corroboration the highlight of multiple skull fractures, base of skull, and cavallarium. It couldn't be any more obvious, his rooting in this document and reliance upon it. Why else would he have it in his slide presentation? And he's got the name of Dr. Scordi-Bello. And frankly, Your Honor, he didn't fight that whatsoever in the questioning of him. Then you go to underneath cause of death, blood impact, injuries of head, and hypothermia. He essentially repeated that on his testimony. And then if we could, Mr. Wilk, just go to the right. And so you've got highlighted head, skull fracture radiating from the right occipital skull and into the right parietal bone, right and left occipital foci, and bilateral anterior foci and orbital plates. Again, the highlighted means something. He's adopting it. And lastly, that the depiction of the skull here, I believe that's Dr. Welcher's handwriting. I believe that's his green, the LR, because I've never seen this green highlighting before. And it could also be Dr. Scordi-Bello's. That's another possibility. I'm not sure. But let's assume sort of the most conservative part that it's Dr. Scordi-Bello's. The key part is he's got it in there and he is referencing it. So, Your Honor, the last point really for both of them, and I wanted to save this point because it applies to both. With regard to experts, the law is clear. So I think the easiest part to show what our position here is the adoption. But in it, it's clearly shown. Adoption doesn't mean you have to agree with it. You just have to put your expert hands around it, wrestle with it, deal with it, and there is no rule of law that I'm aware of that says you can't question an expert witness unless it's something that the expert witness agrees with. If the expert witness has reviewed it and considered it, and especially if they've rejected it. The easiest is obviously reviewed, considered, and adopted. But it's certainly permissible and important to a defendant's constitutional right, Sixth Amendment to cross-examination, if an expert says or even infers, I reject this. I reject what Trooper Paul did, or I reject what Dr. Scordi-Bello did. That is decision-making of an expert that the attorney has a right to be able to test. Why did you reject it? What was your thought process in rejecting it? And that applies to both Trooper Paul and Dr. Scordi-Bello, because as I understand it, this witness, Dr. Welcher, is not, he says, I'm not relying upon Trooper Paul, which is completely false based upon what I just showed. But even if he just rejects it, in addition to what he has done, we have the right to test and get answers as to why he did it. And the same with Dr. Scordi-Bello. Once he goes to this level, Your Honor, I believe it's a straightforward right, especially of a defendant in a criminal trial, and especially of the stakes and the charges this high, that we get to test it. What I think, lastly, my point here, Your Honor, the Commonwealth is doing is this. The Commonwealth knows Trooper Paul and Dr. Scordi-Bello are problematic for their theory and their narrative. Trooper Paul has got, if you work backwards from his key cycles, you end up with 1162-2, their key cycle. That ends up being not in front of 34 Fairview, but it ends up when the Lexus is in the possession of the state. That is the result of that. And that was something that was addressed square head on in the first proceeding. We're not coming up with some fanciful ghost in the second trial. This was gone through extensively in the first proceeding. And I understand this is a new trial, but it goes to show it's not something coming out of the blue, etc. And with regard to Dr. Scorti-Bello, it was remarkable on the redirected. I've never seen a prosecution essentially go after the opinions and conclusion of their own medical examiner when they basically said, the medical examiner, I can't call this a homicide. The manner of death is undetermined. And the medical examiner says, I don't see any motor vehicle impact injuries. There couldn't be anything more apt, more probative than whether or not the injuries to the decedent are from a motor vehicle. The Dr. Welcher himself is saying they are. That's the essence of his opinion. It's the essence of his test. We get to be able to, respectfully, Your Honor, say, well, wait a minute. You said you looked at the autopsy, you said this, you highlight it, but you're going against the medical examiner on whether there's motor vehicle injuries. The experts can't, Your Honor, cherry pick and choose from documents. They can't use it as a shield and a sword. They can't put up, for example, Dr. Scorti-Bello's autopsy report, cherry pick things to benefit from them, and then and they did it on direct. And then all of a sudden on cross, when we want to go and test that, they say, oh, no, you can't do it. Your Honor, this whole argument is absurd. And it's antithetical to the Sixth Amendment. And even if, and this is my last point, even if this were merely a civil case, this would be routine cross-examination against the expert on the side. So in conclusion, Your Honor, I respectfully request that Ms. Reed and her team be allowed to exercise their constitutional right to cross-examination, the keystone of a defense in a criminal trial, cross-examination, and that they be able to take the shield that the prosecution is trying to put on us and be able to combat the sword that the prosecution has put forward with regard to trying to cherry pick from this information, and that we get to proceed, and we get to proceed undaunted from all the serial objections yesterday that interrupted my cross-examination. Thank you, Your Honor.
What arises from the litany of complaints by the defense is that there is no constitutional right to usurp the rules of evidence. There is no case law, as much as they urge the court and yell out the word case law and constitutional right and Sixth Amendment right. There is no case law to support what they are trying to do. It is a simple endeavor that is clouded by all the rhetoric that they offer. And it is clear, and the court knows what they're trying to do. They're trying to pit the inadmissible opinion of a non-testifying witness against a testifying witness. They have asked Dr. Scorti-Bello what her opinion is, and although it's not consistent with our reading of the case law, they were allowed to introduce that it was an undetermined cause of death or mechanism. That evidence is already in front of the jury, but they can't simply repeat it because it sounds good to them or they think it's helpful. Simply because a witness uses a document or looks at it or uses part of an autopsy does not let them regurgitate an opinion that's already in evidence to try to phantom cross-examine an expert. Dr. Welcher is clear. He did not rely on Dr. Scorti-Bello's conclusion that this cause of death was undetermined. In fact, as an aside, he said, I wouldn't, because she's not qualified for that. And so this is a simple game. Let's pit one witness against the other and suggest that the Commonwealth's witnesses are inconsistent. They take it a step further. They want to relive what they think is their past success last year in this case without actually calling the witness. They want the jury to hear their perspective that a past witness had confusion in his analysis, but they don't want to call the witness. They want you to allow them to do that, not just shouting it out and have sustained objections, which has happened this entire case, but they actually want you to be able to allow them to ask Dr. Welch these questions, which he did not rely on. We had a voir dire. He was clear. He did not rely on the analysis of Trooper Paul. He did not rely on that determination or undetermined determination by Dr. Scordi-Bello. It is that simple. They try to throw some fluff out and they throw around some documents. We have slide 22. Simply because there's a suggestion that Trooper Paul might be the hand in the picture is not an anchor, it's not a tether, it's not an adoption, it's no such thing. In fact, if you look at that photograph, it was taken by Zach Clark. So by the rationale of the defense, they should now be able to ask Dr. Welcher any question they want about Zach Clark's opinions, efforts, what Zach Clark did. It is a photograph that he considered, not an opinion, not an analysis. It has nothing whatsoever to do with Dr. Welcher's analysis or opinions. In fact, the evidence is to the contrary. He came out, conducted an independent analysis, did all of the work himself, considered documents, and he was specific about what was part of his opinion and what was not, and this information was not part of his opinion. They turned to the Google map. Bit misleading. This was generated by Google. Two separate people used the same program, but when you look at the CARS report and you look at Dr. Welcher's PowerPoint, it's different. Dr. Welcher's has a map on the side, and when you look at the numbers themselves, the CAR report says minimum 36.1, maximum 38.8. Dr. Welcher's slide, 37.9, 38.1. So in no way did he adopt, anchor, tether, use as any basis. In fact, his is different and separate, as all of his analysis is. And so the portrayal of this necessity of information so they can sneak in inadmissible opinions with no witness is simply improper. There is no case law. There is no legal support for it. They cannot reach back into last year and manipulate a witness and ask him about something that he didn't rely on because it feels good or it sounds good for their case. Dr. Welcher did not rely on Trooper Paul's analysis or reports, and he did not rely on the conclusion of Dr. Scordi-Bello of undetermined. If they want to call Trooper Paul, well, maybe they can try to do that, but Dr. Welch is not the right witness for it. These opinions to try to do a credibility eval is a core preclusion in criminal law, a core preclusion. You cannot vouch for the credibility of another witness. You cannot comment. It's like asking, did the police officer lie when he said the light was red? It's the absolute same analysis. It just has a lot of icing on it.
Very briefly, bring the jury. Start getting the jury ready, please.
Your Honor, with regard to Trooper Paul, Mr. Brennan did not address 80% of the slides that I addressed that showed the basis. When he talked about the picture, making it seem like the picture is the only thing we're relying upon, there's clearly other items. But even the picture, Your Honor, the purpose of the picture is it's got the odometer reading. That's why they took the picture, and that's the tether. So the photo is completely relevant. It's not who's in it. It's the fact that that's the odometer reading they're using. Next point with regard to case law. Mr. Brennan presents none to go against the common sense law that has been there for years. The other thing, Your Honor, is with regard to Mr. Brennan keeps trying to put my arguments into a credibility, like we're trying to attack the credibility of Trooper Paul. He says that we're trying to redo last trial. To the contrary, Your Honor, it's the Commonwealth that brought Trooper Paul into the second trial through Dr. Welcher and Dr. Welcher's reliance on all the work of Trooper Paul. They've brought it in here, and because of that, we get the right to cross-examine it. Last point. This is not about credibility. He keeps saying something that's not happening, that we're going to attack the credibility of Trooper Paul. What we want to do is to say to Dr. Welcher, you have brought up Trooper Paul. You have used his odometer reading. That odometer reading tethers through to Google. It tethers through everything you're doing. It's the foundation. But what you're ignoring, Dr. Welcher, are all the key cycle results that come from that odometer reading that you relied upon. Dr. Welcher himself can't cherry pick grab things that he needs from Trooper Paul to do his analysis, and then the Commonwealth say, but you can't go after that because it somehow has Trooper Paul's name on it. It's illogical, Your Honor, and it's incorrect under the law. Thank you.
So I disagree with you, Mr. Alessi. I'm not allowing in the line of questioning regarding Trooper Paul, and I'm not allowing the line of questioning regarding Dr. Scordi-Bello. So that's my ruling. Let's bring the jury in. Well, come over here because they're on their way. I do appreciate you were waiting. We were doing work in here, but we appreciate your patience. So I do have to ask you those 3 questions. Were you all able to follow the instructions and refrain from discussing this case with anyone since we left yesterday? Everyone said yes or nodded affirmatively. Were you also able to follow the instructions and refrain from doing any independent research or investigation into this case? Everyone said yes or nodded affirmatively. Did anyone happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case since we left yesterday? No. Everyone said no or should be. Thank you. Could we have Dr. Welcher back in, please? And Mr. Alessi, feel free to go to the podium.
You trying to do it with the computer and any electronics there so we don't have to address it?
It doesn't look like it's turned on at all.
Oh, okay, good. And smart watches.
So this one.
Sir, I'll remind you, you're still under oath.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Honor.
And Dr. Welch, we're going to ask you to not turn on your computer yet.
Okie dokie.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, if I could, smart watches that are receiving text messages during his direct, if we can make sure that that does not occur.
I can get my email. I'll take all the time.
Okay, or just don't look at your watch.
I'll split it, okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, Dr. Welcher.
Good morning.
Do you know whether there was glass found on the bumper of Miss Reed's Lexus SUV?
My understanding there was, yes.
Did you reach a conclusion on whether the glass on the bumper came from the drinking glass that you assert Mr. O'Keefe was holding at the time of the alleged impact?
I didn't have an opportunity to inspect the glass, but the glass was broken and there was glass on the bumper. That's all I know.
So you, as you sit here today, you have no basis to conclude that the glass on the bumper came from the glass that you depict as having been held by Mr. O'Keefe at the time of the alleged impact. Is that correct?
Well, you're mixing a couple things.
No, Dr. Welcher,
So
if you can just answer my question.
I'm trying
I
to.
need to rephrase it, I will. I'll ask it a different way.
Please.
You have no basis, as you sit here today, to conclude that the glass on the bumper came from a drinking glass connected to Mr. O'Keefe, do you?
Well, we have a picture of a broken glass at the scene. So I wouldn't say we have no basis. We don't necessarily have enough to conclude it's from it, though.
Do you had depictions in your test with Mr. O'Keefe holding a glass, correct?
Correct.
My question is, you have no evidence to show at all other than, and I'm talking evidence, testing information. You're saying you have no evidence that shows that the glass on the bumper is not the same glass as you showed on your slides as being found supposedly at the scene. You have no test evidence that that's the same glass, do you?
So again, the one I have at my testing obviously was not the same glass. We have pictures of a broken bar glass in the snow near where Mr. O'Keefe's body was. We have glass fragments on the rear of the bumper. That's the extent of my knowledge on the correlation between those two.
So do you said you reviewed the reports and testimonies of various Commonwealth representatives, correct? That's in your report.
Correct. In the initial.
In the initial, right, correct. And some of those reports included forensic scientists who work for the Massachusetts State Police, correct?
I believe that's correct.
And you put those in your report as documents that you reviewed, correct?
Correct.
And as you sit here today, it's your testimony, you don't know whether in any of the reports of the Massachusetts State Police there is an answer to the question of whether there's any connection at all between the glass found in the snow and the glass on the bumper.
I recall it being inconclusive.
Oh, so you recall that the testing was inconclusive?
I don't remember what testing they did, but for example, when they put the taillight fragments back together, they were able to deduce that the fragments were from the taillight. I don't think they attempted to do that with the glass.
Assume that there has been testing of the glass on the bumper, and assume that that testing conclusively determines that the glass on the bumper is not the glass that was found in the snow.
Okay.
Assume that.
Okay.
How would that affect your analysis?
I'd want to know where the glass came from, but we still have a whole bunch of other elements. So I don't think it would affect the end results.
So would it have any part in your analysis with my assumption that the glass on the bumper is not the glass that's associated with the broken glass that was supposedly found in the snow?
Yes, I mean, we always want to have as much answers or as many answers as possible. So I would want to know if we could figure out where it came from.
And wouldn't the fact, assuming that the test results show there's no connection, meaning the glass on the bumper is different from the glass in the snow, wouldn't that be contrary to your theory of what happened in some way?
It depends on when the glass was actually broken. The glass was in his hand, at least that's the testimonial evidence I have seen. So it depends on whether it's broken from contact with the rear of the vehicle or broken with contact on the ground.
Assume that the glass on the bumper is not the glass that was found in the snowbank. Doesn't that, at least in part, contradict your hypothesis as to whether there was contact by the Lexus with Mr. O'Keefe at 34 Fairview?
So if you recall on my slides, nowhere did we discuss that in my slides. So no, it wouldn't contradict it. I would want to know where that glass came from.
But you didn't seek that information, did you, sir, in your analysis to determine where the glass came from?
Well, of course I did. I read the reports about it.
But you sit here and you say you don't know the answer. There's steps you could have taken to get that answer quite easily. Couldn't you have, sir?
Not me. That's a material science expert.
You've been communicating with Lieutenant Tully, haven't you?
Correct.
You couldn't have asked Lieutenant Tully that question?
To my knowledge, he's not a material science expert.
But could he have told you the result of testing on that glass on the bumper and whether it was any way associated with the glass found in the snow? Wouldn't that have been an easy question to ask him? Just, has there been testing, and if so, what's the results?
Yes, but my knowledge from reading the reports was it was inconclusive.
But you didn't read all of the reports, did you, sir?
Apparently not.
Let's turn to another topic, laser scans. Part of your analysis involved conducting laser scans of portions of 1 Meadows Avenue, the house of Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
Correct.
Those laser scans were used, at least in part, to answer the question of whether the collision between Miss Reed's SUV and Mr. O'Keefe's Chevy Traverse at 1 Meadows at approximately 5:07 a.m. on January 29, 2022 caused the right rear taillight of the Lexus to break, correct?
Correct.
And in that analysis, inches literally matter, correct?
You want to get it as accurate as possible.
And the reason why inches matter is because, and we're going to get to this, you try, and you did it in your slide presentation on direct, you tried to see whether the Lexus lined up with the Traverse such that there could be a break of the taillight. That was part of your analysis, correct?
So the main part of the photogrammetry was to determine the speeds and the angles and the degree of overlap on the vehicles. And then we also looked at the damage from the video, or actually it's just where the snow was knocked off the rear of the Chevy Traverse, and document the height of that.
You said the main part. I don't want to engage in semantics. I want to go to my question of, isn't part of the laser scan analysis to determine whether or not those two vehicles align sufficiently such that the Lexus could break, the taillight of the Lexus could break coming into contact with the Chevy Traverse? Wasn't that part of your analysis, at least in part?
Yes.
Okay. And in that analysis, inches literally matter, correct?
It can, depending on which way you're going inches.
So the Ring camera at One Meadows, you're familiar with that Ring camera, right? At
Correct.
One Meadows? That Ring camera at One Meadows was used as part of the laser scan process that you and your firm Aperture performed at One Meadows on October 2nd, 2024. Do I have the date correct?
I believe so, but like the videos were not literally used during the laser scans. We took the laser scans, the video, combined them together in a process called photogrammetry.
Okay, let's get this down to the fundamentals. You used, and that was my question, Your Honor, if we could publish the exhibit with regard to the Ring camera.
Sure. What exhibit is it?
Yeah, I've got my page. Yeah. Dr. Welcher, you recognize that Ring camera as being at One Meadows. You discussed it, as a matter of fact, on your direct testimony, correct?
Yes.
Now, that Ring camera was utilized as part of your laser scan process, correct? It was used.
So you're confusing laser scan and photogrammetry. The video, the laser scanners are together used in the photogrammetry. The camera and the laser scans are not used necessarily with each other.
Was that Ring camera used for any part of your work?
Absolutely, the photogrammetry.
I just need to be able to finish my question, sir. Was that
Sorry.
Ring camera used for any part of your work at One Meadows on October 2nd, 2024?
Yes.
And it was used for what purpose?
In the photogrammetric process, to establish the position and dimensions of various things in the video. So then we could go back and overlay the vehicles and track the tracks in the snow, as well as look at the damage to the vehicles.
Right. So this was used as a basis, not the only one, to establish dimensions of the other work that was done in analysis at One Meadows, correct?
Correct.
You can take that down, Mr. Wolk. You know that the Ring camera at One Meadows, in existence when Aperture did the work on October 2nd, 2024, was different than the Ring camera that was in existence on January 29th of 2022, the date where you went through to see if those two vehicles align. Is that correct? The cameras are different.
That is correct.
And you know that the cameras are different, and you knew that as part of your analysis, correct?
Correct.
Did you document the differences between the two cameras as part of any work performed at One Meadows?
Yes.
And did you measure any differences there might have been between the location of the newer ring camera from the older one that was in existence on January 29th of 2022?
No. What we did is use the current ring camera in conjunction with the old ring camera, and with the laser scans, we're able to, again, map the points onto the scene. That's why I showed you the report from the photogrammetry software that reported our error.
Sir, my question was just measurement, not your process.
Oh.
Did you measure the difference
I don't believe so.
where the old camera was and where the new camera was?
No. It was angled slightly more to the right, though.
How would you know that if you were not retained on January 29th of 2022? How would you know where the original angles were?
Because when you look at the first camera, the one on January 22nd, it's here. The new one is slightly over to the right.
That's an eyeball approximation analysis. That's not a measurement, correct?
Well, I don't know that we actually measured it, but we accounted for it and corrected for it. But you can see, for example, what the original one shows, for example, to the left-hand side, compared to what the new one shows to the left-hand side, and it's angled more to the right.
Sir, you have experience with ring cameras, correct?
I do.
And I think a lot of members of the public have experience with ring cameras. You can move just the camera portion ever so slightly and change significantly the angle of the camera, can't you, what it captures? Just a small turn.
Potentially.
Right. Even a millimeter turn can make a change. A 2 millimeter, a 1 inch can make a significant change with regard to what the camera captures, correct?
Could, sure.
So, did you measure whether the newer camera that was present on October 2nd, 2024 was installed to the left? And I'm talking measure. To the right, to the top, or the bottom relative to the camera that was there on January 29th of 2022?
So we solved for the camera position.
I'm asking if you measured, sir.
Oh, no, we didn't measure.
So let's talk about some other differences with regard to cameras and ring cameras. Different ring cameras can have different levels of distortion, correct?
Potentially.
Cameras, well, are you saying that all ring cameras have the same level of distortion?
No, but again, they're mass produced, so you could have some that have the same exact distortion. You could have some that have different.
And you don't know the comparative distortion between what I'm just going to now refer to as the old ring camera that was there January 29, 2022, and the camera that you saw on October 2024, which I'll refer to the new camera. You don't know the difference in the distortion between those cameras as you sit here today, do you?
So we know enough information that if the distortions had been different, our errors would have been too high. And so the fact that our errors are within acceptable, or what's called an RMS error, we know that the distortions are similar enough to give us accurate measurements.
Sir, that is speculation. That is not data. That is not a measurement. You didn't measure the distortion, sir, did you? Of the cameras, you didn't have the old camera to do it.
We didn't, but we had images from the old camera, and then when we get images from the new camera and solve those camera properties and then overlay data from the old images to the new images with the point clouds, if that distortion is too great, we will have too high of errors in our project, which is why I showed the error report from the photogrammetry process to show that we have checked for that and documented that our errors are an acceptable range so that we have confidence in our results.
you do not have information from the manufacturer of Ring. You didn't present it, and you don't have it, as to what is the acceptable level of distortion for the analysis that you did, do you, sir?
The photogrammetry.
You have that from Ring.
And I don't have it from Ring, but I
Thank
don't need
you.
it from Ring.
So now let's go to, if cameras have different levels of distortion, that would change the analysis in reconciling the difference between their angles. That's a pretty straightforward proposition, sir, wouldn't it?
So it depends on how much difference it is, but we have accounted for that.
With which model of the Ring camera was present at One Meadows on January 29, 2022? Which model?
I don't know. I'd have to go look through the data.
Do you believe you, I'm not going to take up the time to have you look, but do you really believe you've got the model of the Ring camera that was in existence on January 29th of 2022?
I don't know. I
You
need to
didn't
look through the
present it
report.
in your direct testimony, did you, sir?
I did not.
So do you have the model of the Ring camera that was present at One Meadows on October 2nd, 2024?
No.
So you don't have even the model for either one of them?
Nope, but we have videos from both of them and scans of the scene.
So now let's talk about another aspect of Ring cameras. They have mechanisms, as I was talking about earlier, that allow the user to adjust the camera angle, correct?
Correct.
And do you know whether there was a difference in the camera angle between the two cameras?
Yes, as we already discussed, there was a slight difference in the
But
angles.
you don't have a measurement of that, right, sir?
Correct.
Okay.
But we accounted for it.
So wouldn't a difference in models of Ring cameras be relevant at all to your analysis of trying to reconcile any differences between them?
So if you have video from both of them and you have laser scans with three-dimensional geometry of the scene, you can go in, and it's called a reverse camera analysis, and solve for the distortion properties. The scans give you the real-world dimensions. So once you know the real-world dimensions, you can then go in, you can go in and then solve for the camera lens properties based upon the real-world distortions. So, for example, if there's a little bit of bending at the end, the laser scan data will show that, and you can correct for that, knowing information about the laser scanner.
I'll ask
or the laser
question.
scan data.
I'm sorry, I thought you finished, sir. I'm going to ask the question again because it's a narrow question. Wouldn't knowing the difference in the models be relevant? That's all I'm asking. Wouldn't it be relevant to your analysis of reconciling the differences to them? Wouldn't
No.
it be relevant?
No.
So you think the different models are irrelevant to any process you occasioned at one? It's irrelevant.
So the analysis of the video itself is more important than the models?
I'm not asking if it's more important. I'm just asking, would it be relevant?
No, I don't believe it'd be relevant.
Now let's go to another aspect of the cameras. Are key parameters in a camera that the software needs to know focal length?
It is?
Is imaging size something that is an important parameter in a camera?
Yes.
Are sampling characteristics an important parameter in cameras?
Can be.
Is the principal point, you understand that concept, sir? Is that an important parameter in a camera?
Define how you're using principal point.
Sure. A principal point of an image is the point where a camera's direct line of sight, called, as you may know, the optical axis, intersects the image plane. Does that
Gotcha,
sound
yes.
familiar? Mm-hmm. So isn't that the image's mathematical center, the principal point?
More or less, yes.
And for high accuracy photogrammetric work, it's important to know if the lens is mounted centered over the image sensor due to the small manufacturing variances, correct?
Could be important.
And if the principal point is the center of the image. That's relevant. So doesn't that affect the mathematical calculation of the light ray geometry.
It could.
So the variance in manufacturing between cameras is a known issue. Do you agree?
I do.
There's small manufacturing variances that affect one of the key components of the fundamental parameters of the camera, namely the principal point, right?
Correct.
Did you perform the camera calibration of the camera in place in October of 2024?
Yes. So in photogrammetry, we calibrated the photogrammetric analysis to the camera.
Did you address the principal point in that calibration? Do you have documentation that you addressed that important factor, the principal point?
So the checking of the RMS error in the software takes into account, sums up all the potential errors in the measurement, which would include that.
Okay. Sir, you know the importance of all of these topics because the output of all the work Aperture did at One Meadows, almost all of it, springs from that camera, correct?
It starts there.
Okay, it starts there. And if the starting point is wrong, then where you go from the starting point is going to be at least potentially wrong, correct?
Potentially.
Would you agree that Ring cameras have a swiveling mechanism so that the user can adjust the camera angle?
Some do.
Do you know whether the camera that was in existence on January 29, 2022 had a swiveling mechanism?
I believe it did.
Believe? Do you know?
I do not know for a fact, but those style of Ring cameras on the surveillance have adjustability that includes angle.
But you don't know whether the camera that was there, the specific camera on January 29, 2022, had a swiveling mechanism or not, correct?
Correct.
And do you know whether the camera that you saw in October of 2024 had a swiveling mechanism on it?
It did.
And where did you document the fact that it had a swiveling mechanism?
I think we have photos of the camera.
Did you document it in writing, and did you document the tolerance of the swiveling mechanism?
No.
Let's go to, and again, all of the camera, this camera that you used is the starting point for your laser scan and photogrammetry process, correct?
Correct.
All right. Let's go to another topic. On your direct testimony, as I recall, you stated essentially from various information that you lined up in the video, and we're talking about the lining up of the Lexus with the Traverse. And this is at One Meadows. And so, as I understand what you did, sir, is you took what are called point clouds, 3D images, created them for the Lexus. You took created 3D images, synonym point clouds, of the Traverse, and then you attempted to line them up to determine, among other things, whether they would align sufficient so that the Lexus could line up and potentially hit the Traverse such that the tail light of the Lexus could be broken. Was that at least part of your analysis?
That was part. There was more.
So, you showed a slide, a few slides, and with Your Honor's permission, what I'd like to do is to start with slide 90.
All right. Do you have any problem with Dr. Welcher keeping his printed copy that he was using?
I have no problem with the printed copy, Your Honor.
So, I'm sorry, what slide again?
90.
Your Honor, my printed copy is tiny.
Okay.
Can I
Can
pull it
you
up?
see the...
Yes. Yeah.
Does that slide that's part of your presentation depict a view from the top of the Lexus on the right and the Chevy Traverse on the left.
Correct?
And is that depicting contact between the two vehicles?
It is?
Now let's zero in a closer look, and that is a contact point. Am I correct?
Correct? I mean, there's multiple points. There's more than
Multiple
one.
points, but it shows more clearly the contact
Correct.
between the two vehicles. Now if we could the next, and that is number 91, Mr. Wolf. So Your Honor, 91. I think these are just going to go in order for a few, and I'll keep announcing them. So this is 91, same vehicles, just a different viewpoint. Is that correct, Dr. Welcher?
Correct. This and the next slide.
I just want to stay
I know.
with this one. I just
Hold on a
asked the
second.
question, does it show the contact?
Right. So go ahead and answer now.
This slide and all the other slides, we're trying to show the angle of contact, but because it's two-dimensional image, you're losing some perspective. For example, here you're seeing the chrome piece on Mr. O'Keefe's Chevrolet, which is on the right. You're seeing it obviously behind where the Lexus is. So we were trying to show it at a whole bunch of different angles to try and illustrate the degree of closeness or lack thereof.
Alrighty. So
Thank you.
is it correct that on your direct examination you said in sum and substance, we looked at the degree of overlap and there's only about a 2 to 3 millimeters of overlap between the vehicles? Is that what you recall saying on direct?
That is correct.
And that you stated that that supposed 2 to 3 millimeters of overlap was insufficient to cause the tail light of the Lexus to contact the rear of the Chevrolet. Do you recall saying that?
That's correct.
Now, I would like you to look at that. This is from your slide presentation. Is that not showing contact between the two vehicles?
Oh, it absolutely is not. What you're seeing is a portion of the vehicle that is behind the area. Keep in mind the angle, the Lexus is angled off to the left. So the area that you see here is actually, in this case, in front of where the taillight is. This is why we tried showing it from a whole bunch of different angles, because when you try and take a two-dimensional image and look at it, you see stuff in the background. So and again, this is why in the computer, we overlaid them, looked at the measurements, in the computer where you don't have this, we have the three-dimensional measurements, and it does not hit.
Where did you show in your slide presentation what you just said, that it doesn't show in overlap?
So
Where?
it shows a contact. It definitely contacted, I'm sorry, Mr. Reporter, down below here. It does not show a contact here. So to answer your question, all the next slides were our attempt to do that. So all the next slides is your answer.
We're going to go to those next slides. So just to be clear, you're saying that that depiction does not show any contact between the taillight of the Lexus and the Chevy Traverse.
So the upper taillight, just to be clear, because the lower taillight is much closer.
Well, it's not only much closer, it's in contact, isn't it, sir?
It's very close. It's probably within an inch of being in contact.
Oh, so you state that even the lower part of the taillight is not making contact?
So, again, maybe there's a photo we could show or a scan. That is on the rear of the vehicle, and it contacts on the corner, which is just around, so maybe like an inch or so in front of it on the corner.
I'm just going with what you presented in your slide
Well, let's
presentation.
go to the next slides, and then
Sir,
maybe
I
we'll see.
will determine which slides we go
Okay.
to on my questioning.
I'm just hoping
So
to answer your
now let's
question.
go to, Mr. Wolf, the next slide.
There we go.
In your presentation, my question is zeroing in. Are you saying that that slide does not show contact between the tail light of Ms. Reed's Lexus and any part of the Chevy Traverse?
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly what it shows. You can see a little better here. Again, we tried all these different angles, which is why all these slides are in there. But you can see some of the geometry of the light. This structure, and again, remember I said the Chevy kind of curves in as it goes up a little bit?
Let's go to the next slide. 40. 40, yes, please. Is it working? 41, Your Honor.
Right, thank you.
One moment, Your Honor.
That's Exhibit 41? No, I have a question, because that's not my slides.
So, Mr. Alessi, is this exhibit number 41, or is this from the PowerPoint? Because,
Slide 41? Slide.
okay.
Yes.
So I'm putting this up because I want to show an actual photograph of that tail light, and I would like you, sir, to focus on the quarter panel tail light in each. Do you see a jutting out of the quarter panel tail light in that photo? You see it jut out?
So I don't know if you and I are talking the same thing. There are little fins here.
Correct. Now, what I'd like to do is to go back to the depiction we were just looking at, and that depiction doesn't show the jutting out, does it?
No, it does. Those are actually more on the side of the vehicle. You can't see them in this image.
Correct. You
But-
can't see them.
Hold on a second. I wasn't finished. But
Sir.
they are 100% there. We actually did special hand scans with a hand scanner of the taillight to put it back on to the vehicle.
You say they're 100% there, but you can't see it in that depiction, can you? The jutting out that you could see in the two-dimensional one we just saw. You can't see it.
I can't see who's behind that wall because it's being blocked by something. I can't see on the side of the taillight because it's on the side I can't see. It's being blocked.
Sir, my question is simple. You cannot see the jutting out of the tail light in this depiction, can you?
Correct.
Okay, now let's go on to the next question in this topic. You could have easily solved what you consider to be the issues you had with trying to show it lining up, couldn't you, sir? You had an easy solution for that.
I took the best solution. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
You had 3D images, correct?
I did.
You could have shown and measured 3D images to get almost the exact contact point and almost the exact dimensions if you had just used the 3D images that you had available to you. Isn't that correct?
That's exactly what we did. When I went through the video analysis, I showed you how we overlaid the point clouds, the 3D scans, on top of each vehicle. So we took the, we took
Sir,
the vehicles.
please don't interrupt.
Hold on.
Your
Hold
Honor,
on.
he keeps referencing my hand and saying I'm doing something when I'm not, and I think that's distracting to the jury.
So-
I'm not interrupting him.
Hold on. Let the witness answer the
I
question.
am. I'm just holding my hand like this, Your Honor. He keeps saying that I'm doing
Mr.
something.
Alessi, please.
All right.
Go ahead, finish the answer, Dr. Walker.
Again, in the photogrammetric analysis, I showed the video. I showed how we overlaid the point cloud on top of the video. That proves that the way we solved it, correct camera characteristics, matches. Otherwise, that would be distorted. We overlaid the scans of the Lexus into the photogrammetric analysis. We overlaid the scans of the scene into the photogrammetric analysis. We overlaid all that stuff into the analysis. We did exactly what you're suggesting.
You could have easily addressed this issue by the following. If you really believe there was no contact or not sufficient contact, you could have produced a graphic that shows a gap between the two vehicles. A graphic, couldn't you? That's not a graphic.
What is that?
Sir, I get to ask the questions, and you are to answer them subject to the judge's ruling. So my question is, couldn't you have created a graphic that would have better shown the issue that you are creating or talking about today? That's my question. Couldn't you have created a graphic?
We did. We created a whole bunch of graphics.
You called what we just saw a graphic?
Yes.
Well, if there's a gap, why isn't there then something that shows a clear gap?
Because when you have the angulation of the vehicles, you have perspective. When you're looking at it, even if you do a top down, you see everything projected onto a single flat plane. So you can't tell the height of things. So when you see things in this dimension, you can't necessarily see depth of things. So you lose in two-dimensional images, you lose one dimension depending on which way you're looking. That's why I showed it from all these different angles to try and show exactly what you're saying. We had graphics to do that.
3D images allow you to show perspectives for 360 degrees, correct? Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, none of what you presented in your slideshow shows the contact points from 360 degrees, does it?
I don't understand your question. Are you asking if I showed it at every single, I went through 360 slides that showed it at every single degree?
Sir, let's move on. I think I've made the point.
So I'm going to strike the comment,
Okay.
Mr. List.
Dr. Welcher, let's go to the next topic. And keep with these two depictions. Are these two images point clouds or 3D images? Are these two?
Those are one and the same thing. They're yes.
I would use them as synonym. Which term of the two do you want to use? Point cloud or 3D images?
Both are fine. It's a 3D image composed of points.
So let's just call them 3D images so we can do this more quickly. The Lexus and the Chevy Traverse that are depicted there are both 3D images of those vehicles, correct?
Correct.
And Aperture created the 3D images, correct?
Correct.
Sir, did you do these scans and did you personally create these images?
No, one of the assistants at Aperture did.
So you're speaking about what somebody else did at Aperture, correct?
They were doing it at my direction. And for example, the Lexus scan, I showed the photographs. You can see the gentleman that works at Aperture, Mike Morelli, was scanning them for me while I was doing the rest of the inspection. And then the hand scanning of the rear tail light was done by another engineer. I was out there with him doing it, taking measurements. And then same thing with the Chevy Traverse.
My question is, you didn't do the creation of these 3D images, did you?
The individual images, no.
All right, so let's go to these individual images. These are 3D images. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Let's look at the taillight.
Okay.
That's not a 3D image. That's a Photoshop, isn't it?
Nope.
Oh, so it's your testimony that that taillight is a 3D image.
That absolutely is a 3D image. The way you can tell is when you get up near the chrome, because lasers don't like shiny objects, you start to get a scatter. So see all these dots here? If that was a photo, you wouldn't have these dots.
Let's go to the Chevy Traverse. Let's, Mr. Woke, zero in on the content. Yeah. There's grain on that taillight, in the taillight. That's a 3D image of a taillight, isn't it, sir?
They're both 3D images.
Well, I just want to stay with one. That tail light is a 3D image, and one of the ways you can tell is because it's got all that grainy material on it, correct?
Correct.
Now let's go back, Mr. Woke, to the Lexus. Let's now go to the bumper.
But do you want me to explain the difference?
No,
Okay.
thank you. I would like to go to the bumper. Do you see any the predominance of any grainy image on the bumper?
There's a little bit. So, for example, when you get near edges, it has a hard time with edges.
I'm
So
sorry,
you-
the bumper cover.
right.
See the bumper cover up above?
This whole thing is the bumper cover. That's the step pad. That's the rear body panel or the rear deck lid.
I'm talking about the step pad, sir. Just the step pad of the bumper?
You asked him about just from here to here.
Correct. The bumper step
Can we
pad.
zoom in on it?
Pardon me?
Can we zoom in on it?
Sure. Do you see any?
Yeah, I see graininess.
Let's go over to...
Right in here. You can see it all through here. You see it through here.
Well, I'm talking about the step pad, not the entire bumper. I'm just talking about the step pad.
Right. So you're zooming in on the bumper.
Right.
The step pad is this structure up here.
We're going to move up. It just takes a while. So your testimony is that is a...
Can you zoom in more?
That's... You would like it zoomed in?
Yes, sir.
Sure. Your testimony is that is a 3D image, not a Photoshopped step bumper cover. Is that correct?
So we have mapped the color over the 3D scans. We used two separate scanners. If you recall, when I got out to Miss Reed's vehicle, that taillight was gone. So we had to replace the taillight.
Talking about the bumper cover, not the tail light.
Okay, I'm explaining the process.
I'm just asking about the bumper cover, not the process.
So focus your answer on the bumper.
That is a laser scan.
Okay, so your
That's a 3D
testimony
model.
is the step part of the bumper cover is a 3D image from a laser scan, and it's not a Photoshop. That's your testimony.
Absolutely.
And you didn't perform the work for the 3D that you claim the bumper step up is. You didn't do that work to produce that depiction, did you, sir? Somebody else in your firm did it.
So this is all done at my direction. The engineers that work for me, so I'm telling them what to do. I'm not the one punching the keys.
That's my
I'm saying,
question.
I need you to do this, and this. Use the hand scanner, go scan the light. I need to put this back in because it was missing when we got to it. So, no, I'm not punching the keys.
Okay, so
Okay? Come on over, please.
with regard to, no, we don't need him back up, Mr. Wolf. Isn't it correct that 3D images allow for proper and most accurate measurements as opposed to 2D images? Is that a correct general statement?
I mean, generally, yeah.
Okay, that's my question. So let's go to the next topic. Let's talk about hydraulics on the Lexus SUV. What type of hydraulic system does the Lexus SUV have?
So it has a mechanism, I believe it's actually pneumatic. It's air-based system that raises it up and down.
Do you know what the name of that system is, sir?
No, not off the top of my head.
Do you know how it works specifically?
I do. Well, I mean, I know generally that there's a button on the interior where you can raise and lower the ride height.
And is that the extent of your knowledge of that system on the Lexus?
No. Again, I know when you park it, it'll drop down the ride height. When you adjust it for different roadway conditions, it'll change the ride height.
Do you know what the height tolerances are? In other words, the lowest to the highest?
I believe it's around 1.25 inches. At one point in time, I measured it. I don't remember off the top of my head.
So you believe it's 1.25 inches up and 1.25 inches down? How do you apply the 1.25 inches?
I recall the total being like 1.25 inches, but I measured it at one point in time. I just don't remember off the top of my head.
Would you be surprised to hear that the tolerance is 5 inches on that vehicle?
I would be surprised. I don't recall it being that much, but I would need to double check.
Assume that the manual as well as other informations support that the tolerance is 5 inches and that specifically the vehicle can be raised 3 inches high and it can be lowered 2 inches. That's the basis for the 5. What was the suspension height of Miss Reed's Lexus that you used for your accident reconstruction analysis out front at 34 Fairview between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. on January 29, 2022 to determine whether it was possible for the spoiler on the back of the Lexus to make contact with the eye of Mr. O'Keefe? If it was even possible, what did you use for a measurement of the suspension?
Matched the measurements from when the vehicle was tested, I believe on February 1st at the Canton Police Department.
What match did you make?
So we aligned the bottom of the taillight, actually the sheet metal right below the taillight. So we adjusted the height of the Lexus to match that.
Did you in any place document what level the Lexus was at the time of any testing, meaning the suspension? Did you document at all?
Yes.
Where?
Slide 107.
Can we have slide 107, Mr. Wolf?
And then if you could zoom in on the lower photograph, the gentleman with the blue shirt. Zoom in a little more, please. So if I may, we matched the bottom of the sheet metal here to photographs when it was at the Canton Police Department.
Sir, my question is, where did you document whether the suspension was at 0, whether it was +3 or -2? Where did you document that?
Right here.
And what are the numbers of the documentation of that?
I don't know. We were matching the photos. So I don't care what the numbers are. I care that the height is the same.
Okay, so I just heard you say, if I heard correctly, you don't care what the suspension is at. Is that your testimony?
No, I don't care what the suspension number is as long as the heights match.
I understand. So what was the suspension height of Miss Reed's Lexus at 5:07 a.m. on January 29, 2022 while at One Meadows and colliding with the Chevy Traverse? What was the suspension height then?
We assumed it was the same as when it was at the Canton Police Department.
Exactly. You assumed, but there's no measurement like was just on that depiction. There was no note that said, okay, we're doing this very important and inches sensitive measurements to see whether the tail light on the Lexus makes contact with the Traverse, but there's no measurement and no documentation of what the suspension height was at One Meadows, correct?
So we took the closest measurement in time to the One Meadows event, which is when it was at the Canton Police Department. That was the best information we had.
Well, that information isn't very good because the vehicle had to go from Canton to One Meadows, and when the vehicle drives, the way the suspension system works, it's automatic. When you go above 20 miles an hour, the suspension comes up, and when you turn off the vehicle, it goes down so you can get out easier. So it would be improper to assume that the suspension at One Meadows would be the same at another location.
That's the only, sorry.
Was there an objection? No. Go ahead and answer, please.
That's the extent of the information we had. We had it when it was at the Canton Police Department. We matched that height.
Sorry, sir. I understand.
But actually, you brought up a good point. It's going so slow when it's backing up that it wouldn't raise up. So the static position when it's backing up would be the static position.
But it wouldn't be going in back up from the Canton Police Department to One Meadows. It wouldn't be going back up when it's going in other locations, sir, right? It would be driving forward. It had to get from point A to point B.
Right, but as you pointed out, when you turn it off, it drops down, and then you turn it on, and then once you go above 20, as you indicated, it goes up. But when she's backing up, she never goes more than a couple miles an hour. So it's going to be at the same position as when you start, which is approximately the same position when it's off at the Canton Police Department a couple days later.
Do you know whether the suspension system locks when there is testing of the infotainment system?
Whether the suspensions, I don't know.
Okay. Let's go on to the next topic. You're aware of the vehicle control... Excuse me, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. I want to go, I'm changing topics to go back now to Fairview, 34 Fairview. You don't know what the suspension ride height at 34 Fairview was on January 29th of 2022, do you?
Correct.
So therefore, if you don't know what the suspension height was, because of course you weren't there on January 29, 2022. Therefore there's no measuring stick, as you say, you assert that you would have accounted for it in your methodology. So you don't have the suspension height for that key day, do you, sir?
I only have it 2 days later.
All right. So when you talk about key measurements, such as the spoiler on the top of the Lexus and the inches that are important as to whether things such as is there a contact with the front eye, you don't have some data that would be relevant to that calculation, the sum data being the suspension height of the Lexus at that time, do you?
So we have some data. We have photos of the vehicle 2 days later. We don't know the exact height outside because, as you alluded to, we don't have a measurement on January 29th of it, but we do have it 2 days later. That's the source of the measurement.
You don't have the suspension height or the setting of the suspension of the Lexus that existed on January 29th, 2022, do you?
Correct.
Now let's go on to another topic. Within the 34 Fairview on January 29th of 2022, I'm not going to go over them, but you asserted various measurements, height, width, with regard to the Lexus, correct? It wasn't just for the spoiler at the top, correct?
Correct.
And for all those other measurements that you talked about, you did not have the suspension height and the suspension setting of the hydraulic system of the Lexus on January 29th, 2022, did you?
So the hydraulic's only going to affect the vertical dimensions. It doesn't change anything left to right. It doesn't change anything down the side of the car.
Understood. But for the measurements that are affected by vertical, you didn't have the suspension height of the Lexus system on January 29, 2022.
Again, I only know what it is 2 days later.
So now let's go on to vehicle control history. Sir, you understand what I mean by vehicle control history of
Do? This is
VCH?
text stream information?
Are you aware of what is called the Bosch crash data retrieval system in Lexus vehicles?
Of course, we showed it on my slides.
And the Bosch crash data retrieval system in Lexus vehicles is sometimes referred to as the black box.
No, you're mixing up two things. So the Bosch is like the tools.
It's a question, sir.
So, can you answer that with a yes or no?
Is the Bosch crash data retrieval system the black box on Lexus vehicles? I just wanted to repeat it so we can.
I didn't hear what the objection. You objecting?
I'd like him to be able to finish his answers.
Yeah. So the question was just asked. Can you answer that question?
No, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, next question, Mr. Wilson.
I'm going to ask the question, sir. The Bosch crash data retrieval system in Lexus vehicles, you're familiar with that? Are you familiar?
To access, for example, the pre-collision system, the PCS system, and the VCH, which is the vehicle control history. So TechStream which does a lot of other stuff, but does access that information.
You just mentioned Bosch, didn't you, sir?
So Bosch is not in the Lexus. You use Bosch stuff sold by Bosch, Bosch software and hardware, and you walk up to the Lexus with all the Bosch stuff and plug it in and download the event data recorder, the EDR, the black box. That was my problem. There is no
Understood.
Bosch stuff in the Lexus.
I understand, sir. That was going to be the question that I was trying to get to, but you've explained it, so I don't have to answer the question. Let's go to the VCH database. That you say the stated purpose is to assist technicians at Lexus in vehicle repair and maintenance.
So I didn't say that was a stated purpose. I'm saying that's what Lexus or Toyota says is a stated purpose. It's being used in litigation all the time. All I know is that's what Lexus and Toyota says. But again, it came about right when we started seeing all the sudden accelerations in the Toyota vehicles.
So my question is the VCH database specific to Toyota and Lexus vehicles?
So it's not a database, it's software.
Is the software specific to Lexus and Toyota, the VCH?
Those particular acronyms are, yes.
Want to move to another topic, and we are almost finished. We have just two more topics, sir. How common were VCH events when Miss Reed owned the Lexus?
In 2022,
Do you know the ownership period of Miss Reed with respect to the Lexus? Do you know how long she owned it?
I have that documentation. I don't know off the top of my head.
Do you have an approximate?
No. I mean, it was a 2021 vehicle. Our accident's January 29, 2022. But I did get that information.
Do you know how many VCH events were associated with the Lexus of Miss Reed?
I did not count them, no. I have them all.
Do you
I was
have-
only focused on the ones around our time period.
Exactly. But do you have the number of events? Do you know how many there were?
I could get it for you.
How long would it take, sir?
3 minutes?
Why don't we come back to it?
Okay.
And we'll see if it's...
How about I start this so that we don't have to wait for it to boot up? And then when we come back to it, it's ready to go. You
As
okay
long
with
as
that?
that's all you're looking at, sir.
Yep.
Thank you. And then pick your head up, please, so I can finish these two
Please,
topics.
go ahead.
So, how often were VCH events recorded on the Lexus before January 29th of 2022?
Man, I have to pull this data up.
Fair
to-
enough. Fair
to
enough.
answer that
I
question.
assume that's going to be in what you're also pulling up.
That's the goal here.
Would the number be about 15, 1-5? Does that sound right to you?
Let's see. 1, 2. There's 18.
18. So there were your records show that there were 18 VCH events recorded on Miss Reed's Lexus, correct?
Before the subject one.
Right. Did you conclude that any of those events, other than the 1162-2, were a collision?
No.
Now let's go to reverse recorded events. Can you tell how many of those 18 events were reverse recorded events? And you know what I mean by reverse recorded events?
Yes.
The vehicle going in reverse?
Right.
How many of those events were the vehicle going in reverse?
And this is before.
4. Other than...
He asked
No,
you,
I said
is this
before.
before?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, I would have to pull up the PCS file.
Could you start that and I can continue on with the questioning?
I got to. So the PCS file is I have a second laptop that
Here's
has
what I'm going to
touchscreen.
do. That's not important for me to keep going and get through it,
Okay.
so let's just stay on the events, okay? Only one of all of those events, those 18, are you concluding that there was a collision associated with them, correct? Just one.
No, all those 18 are before. The collision's number 19.
No, I'm saying, I understand what you're saying, but for all the other events that are recorded, you're not, other than the January 29, 1162-2, you're not concluding that any of those were collisions, correct?
I didn't look at them. They were so far mileage away from everything.
But you're not concluding, even though they were so far away and you didn't look at them, you don't conclude from the information you have that any of them were a collision, correct?
Yes.
Sustained.
Let's go to 5:07 a.m. on January 29th, 2022 at 1 Meadows, the home of Mr. O'Keefe.
Okay.
There was a collision between Miss Reed's 6,000-pound Lexus and Mr. O'Keefe's approximately 4,500 Chevy Traverse. That's undisputed, correct? They collided. They made contact.
They touched.
Right. But the actual collision at 1 Meadows did not register the recording of an event on the Lexus VCH system, did it?
Correct. It's too minor.
So However, you want this jury, sir, to conclude that the glancing blow that you contend occurred at 34 Fairview Road by the same 6,000-pound Lexus in contact with a mere 216-pound man did register an event on the Lexus, correct?
No. The impact didn't register the event. As I pointed out, the trigger was from when the accelerator pedal went to 30%. The tech stream does not register crashes at all. It registers excessive acceleration, excessive steering, excessive braking, things like that, things that would be part of the maintenance system. So the tech stream will never register an event, even if you hit a wall at 100 miles an hour necessarily. I mean, it'll cause fault codes and things like that, but that's not what it does. The trigger here was transitioning into reverse and then gunning the accelerator pedal in reverse. And so when it went from 30 up to 74% throttle, once it went over 30 in that transition, that's what triggered the tech stream. It had nothing to do with, and that's why I'm telling you I don't know when in that event the impact occurred, because the tech stream doesn't tell you that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Exactly my point. The tech stream information doesn't tell you when a collision occurs, does it?
Correct.
That's all the questions I have at this time, Your Honor.
All right, why don't we take our morning recess, James?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brandon.
You were asked some
Actually,
questions.
it's morning, but yes.
You were asked some questions about the ring video from Meadows, which was John O'Keefe's home. And you were asked whether you're aware if the cameras had changed over time.
Correct.
The fact that the camera was replaced, does that any way affect your opinion to a reasonable degree of engineering certainty about your conclusions relative to that touching between the cars?
Absolutely not. It would have shown up as increased error when we overlaid the point clouds onto the photos or the point clouds onto the video. If it was an error, it would have showed an error.
Do you have any concern whatsoever that any of the information from the scan is in any way tainted, compromised, or inadequate?
That would be very hard to do. You literally press a button and stand there and watch it, and the laser does its thing. So I have absolutely no reason to disbelieve it. Additionally, again, if it was messed up, once you laid it over on top of the photograph, it would show the difference. So no, the data's fine.
Is there any evidence whatsoever that you've seen that any parts of your presentation were photoshopped?
No.
You were asked questions about the suspension of the motor vehicle of the defendant's Lexus. Do you have any information that the suspension at any point was changed?
No.
Yesterday you were asked a number of questions about formulas. You took out your calculator and you were asked about different variables. Were those variables hypotheticals or were they related to this specific case?
So they seemed hypothetical. Again, you have to be careful when you're talking about failure forces on biomechanical things. For example, if you impact the hand with a, say, 1-inch narrow metal bar, that's a lot different than if you have a broad, say, plastic taillight or a rear body panel. So when you have distributed loads, you can take much more. I told you guys about sitting on the bed, like how much you sink in. That's an example of spreading your load out. When you spread the load out, you don't sink in as much. So same thing with, forces on your body. If you take this pencil, I don't have to press very hard for it to pull in. But if I spread it out, I have to press much harder. So you have to look at the distribution of the load when you're talking about the failure. So when you look at the failure loads, it depends on what you're doing it with. If I hit you with a 5-pound 2x4 or a 5-pound pillow, they're both 5 pounds, but you'd much rather get hit by the pillow than the 2x4.
When you were asked questions about communications, when you would have communications with the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, did you ever use encrypted apps to secretly hide your communications? Apps like Signal?
No, I don't have any of those.
Your Honor.
So the form of the question, ask it differently.
When you were communicating with members of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, did you ever use encrypted apps like Signal to communicate?
Objection, scope, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow it.
No, I mean, I don't even know what that is.
Would you ever use an encrypted app so those communications couldn't be tracked?
No.
Would you ever have any reason as a professional for doing that?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
You were asked about confirmation bias. You remember those questions?
I do?
Could I have slide 33 of your PowerPoint, please?
I'm sorry, what number?
Slide
33.
33.
Give me a second. $33.
You could zoom that in, please? A little larger so we can see it.
I cannot do it with one monitor.
You can't do it any closer than that?
Not since I took down. Oh, hold on. Oh, here we go. Which part do you want me to zoom in?
Miss Gilman can zoom in for you.
Sorry? Which part?
Miss Gilman's going to do it for you.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
If you could zoom in, please. Okay. On shift position signal, going forward, then neutral and reverse, does that data suffer from confirmation bias?
No, that's strictly electronic data.
When we look over at the vehicle speed, can we go to the left a little bit? Down. Vehicle speed ending at 2361 miles per hour. Does that suffer from confirmation bias?
No, again, these are direct readings from the vehicle. Again, that speed on this here, you have to correct for the slippage, which I do later on in the slide, but that is a direct reading from what the speedometer is seeing.
Acceleration at the end of that 10-second window, 74%. Does that suffer from confirmation bias?
No, that's a direct reading of a sensor. That's objective information.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Wow.
Anything, Mr. Lessie?
Your Honor. May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Welcher, you were just asked questions about slide 33, which is a slide about text stream data. You acknowledge that text stream data, what you have called a trigger, like was on that slide, does not tell you if a collision even occurred, correct?
Correct.
With regard to the topic of confirmation bias that you were just asked about in slide 33, am I correct that all of the questions that Attorney Brennan just asked you were about data on that slide, correct? All that's on that slide is data, correct?
Now, he asked me more questions than just this slide.
But were the questions just about data?
On this slide, it was just about data.
Correct. But confirmation bias is really aimed at opinions and conclusions and alternative hypotheses. Isn't that what confirmation bias gets at?
So, generally, yes. Again, I started this case with
It was
the
just a
hypothesis.
question. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
With the hypothesis that the Lexus didn't contact Mr. O'Keefe. And so I start what's called the null hypothesis, that this didn't happen. And then I look at evidence to either include or exclude the null hypothesis. So theoretically, my confirmational bias starts with a bias that it didn't happen.
can you point to one document that shows that you analyzed whether there was no contact between the Lexus and Mr. O'Keefe? Can you point to one document? Was there one document on your slide presentation, for example, that analyzed the null hypothesis, as you call it, there being no contact at all? Was there any slide in your direct testimony?
So remember what I said, we start with hypothesis, we get more data, we whittle down our hypothesis to the final answer. I mean, I had 130 slides. I suspect I bored some of these people to death already. So I didn't include everything. There's thousands of photographs in here. There was a bunch of testing I did with the Lexus about backing, pedestrian detection that, removed certain hypotheses. So if I was able to eliminate a hypothesis, I didn't present it here.
Sir, my question is not about your...
All the slides show that, to answer your question.
Sir, my question is there any slide that says alternative hypothesis to whatever the label is, whatever the term, that says no contact between the Lexus vehicle and Mr. O'Keefe? Is there any document that you presented to the jury that shows that?
Any document where those words are written on it?
Correct.
No.
And to work through hypotheses, different ones, and to see whether there's confirmation bias, have you heard of scientists refer that as showing your math, so to speak, in working through hypotheses, documenting each hypothesis and how and why you rejected them? Have you heard of that term in the scientific world, show your math with confirmation biases and alternative hypotheses? Just a question. Have you heard the idiom, the phrase, show your math?
Your question is, have I ever heard show your math, period?
Associated with the application of various hypotheses to avoid confirmation bias. Have you heard of that term used in that conjunction?
Not really in that
Okay.
context. It's probably, I understand where you're going with it.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
No further questions.
Dr. Welcher, you were all set.
Oh my God, thank you. Give me a minute to pack up and I will be out of here. Oh, I am plugged in, yes, thank you.
Excuse me? Yes, you can put your own.
Thank you. I'll do this out there. May I step down? Your Honor?
Yes, you can. Thank
Pleasure
you
to
very
meet you.
much. Thank you. Mr. Brennan?
Commonwealth moves to introduce and play clip 26.
So I thought, could I have run him over? Did he try to get me as I was leaving and I didn't know it? I mean, I've always got the music blasting. It's snowing. I got the wipers going, the heater blasting. Did he come and hit the back of my car and I hit him in the knee and he's drunk and passed out and asphyxiated or something. And then when I hired David Yannetti, I asked him those questions the night of January 29th. Like, David, what if, I don't know, what if I ran his foot over? Or what if I clipped him in the knee and he passed out or went to care for himself and he threw up or passed out? And David said, yeah, then you have some element of culpability.
Exhibit 207.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth rests.
Okay. Does counsel want to see me?
We do, Your Honor.
Okay, so should we send the jury out or should?
Probably, yes.
So jurors, so everybody can sit. So jurors, the Commonwealth rests. That means that the Commonwealth's case has been presented to you for your consideration. So I need to meet with the lawyers for a few minutes, so we're going to send you back out. I can tell you that it now appears that we're at least on schedule, if not a little ahead of schedule. So we'll send you back out for a short recess.
Rise to the jurors.
All right, so jurors, we all, it happens several times a day, doesn't it? So we don't want to waste anybody's time. I know we've spent a lot of time at sidebar, and we've had times that we've kept you in the deliberation room because we've been trying to sort through everything, trying to make this trial as efficient as possible, but also honoring and respecting all the hard work of the lawyers that's gone into preparing this trial. So sometimes I do understand that it's frustrating for you. But today we were able to spend some time this morning. I know we kept you in there almost a half an hour, and we've just spent some time now. So I can tell you that we are ahead of schedule right now. I still need to talk to the lawyers about something tomorrow morning. So we're going to send you home now and have you come back tomorrow morning at 9:30, because today I know we kept you until 9:30, and it doesn't make any sense where I already know I need to talk to the lawyers tomorrow morning to have you here for a 9 o'clock start. So tomorrow will be a full day, and we'll have you here ready to start at 9:30. Okay, so those same cautions. Please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into the case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about the case, please disregard it and let us know. And also, please continue to be careful with your social media use. So we'll see you tomorrow morning.
Rise to the jury.
All right, so Ms. Little, if you can get me whatever you're going to get me within the next hour, so that would be great. And I'll see everybody tomorrow morning at 9
Thank you.
o'clock.